Greetings from Sambalpur University. Let me introduce myself. I'm Professor Deepak Kumar Behra, and I'm a social anthropologist by training. The lecture which I'm going to deliver is Educational Institutionalization of Tribal Children, Plight of State-Managed Ashram and Kanyashram School. So here basically we'll examine the position of tribal children within the fold of ashram and kanyashram school. As we know, education varies widely from the perspective of time, space, context and requirements. And different tribal communities possess their own system of informal education. And informal education, we know that is different from formal education. And this informal education emphasizes, number one, acquisition of competence. Number two, knowledge and subsistence techniques. Number three, values as effective members of society. These three things are important. And children learn to master this skill from the very beginning through the process of informal education. And here we don't find any special institution or personnel, no rigid timing. It happens in a very natural way. In such situation, education is an informal process of learning skill, maintaining continuity with tradition. So in this, my lecture, I put forth some argument. Argument number one, an educational system becomes less meaningful if it fails to address to the cultural, economic and environmental aspects of the concerned tribal communities. Number two, the assimilation policy of the state destabilizes the traditional learning practice of the tribal community. That's second argument. The third one, lack of scope for participation of the student in the process of school administration creates in their minds a negative attitude. I repeat, negative attitude towards the system and its managers. Number four, the submission of tribal children to the authority of the adults. Adults are here maybe headmaster, headmistress and the school teachers. In the school environment stands in contradiction to their tribal values and ethos. In tribal society, we notice that they are very independent and freedom is given a lot of importance and emphasis, but that doesn't happen in a school environment. And the fifth and the last point is, by treating children as incompetent and immature in a school environment, the teachers fail to understand childhood from a children's perspective. So these are my arguments. Now let me switch over to the ashram school. Following the recommendation of Devar Commission, a number of ashram school and kanyashram school were opened in India during 5th 5-year plan, that is between 70-75. And what is then ashram or this kanyashram? Let us see. An ashram is regarded as a center of learning where the guru, what we call teacher, and the shishya, the student, live together in a congenial environment and where the teaching learning process takes place in a natural way. And ashram school and kanyashrams are residential school meant for tribal and male and female children respectively. And here both student and teacher live together within the school cum hostel premises. When the children of tribal communities which had no formal educational institution begin to live within the strict routine of the ashram school, kanyashram, their daily lives and experience acquire a different turn. They become subject to an authority, rules, regulation in the school and hostel, and get associated with a world with different values and ideology unlike their tribal communities. So let us see life within the walls of ashram school or kanyashram. So what we find are inadequate physical facilities. Residential facility is extremely poor. The hostel room sometimes gets converted into classroom during school hours. Then in the absence of sufficient cots, students sleep on the floor spreading their bed sheet. And I have done some intensive work on inmates of ashram and kanyashram school. So what I have noticed, each student keeps a small wooden box for keeping his personal belongings, and they sleep in two rows with head facing towards the outer wall of the room. And the rooms are very poorly maintained with no fence, leakage on the roofs, broken doors and windows. These are my observations. The lighting and ventilation facilities are far from satisfaction. The unclean toilet and bathroom force the inmate to attend nature's call in open space and outside the campus. Then let us also see the nutritional and health status, So the inmate leads a life under difficult condition and remain in my sample school, and what I saw them almost half-starved in the hostel. And the meager sanction amount for the food of the inmates is often misappropriated by the teacher in charge of student mess. And children do not receive adequate food, and whatever is given to them is of extremely poor quality. The two main meals of the day consist of rice, dal and maybe a vegetable curry. The menu remains same throughout the year, with the exception of few special days in the school when they organize students' feast. However, in winter the inmates are given vegetable curry almost on a regular basis. Malaria, viral fever, diarrhea, dysentery, itching, lice in the hair are the common problems in the school. And what I observed in those schools, the school doesn't conduct a periodic health check-up camp for the inmates. And I once, I found there number of ministers. So let me, put forth my observation with relating to the health minister. The student health minister of the ashram school is really a busy person. We find health minister with a box containing some syrup and tablets. He gives medicine to the inmates as per the instruction manual in case of any ailment. The instruction manual state the use of medicine bearing particular number. The health minister gives medicine to the ailing student just by seeing the numbers of the medicine and the corresponding instruction. He reports to the superintendent only when he finds it difficult to handle a situation. An inmate is taken to the hospital only in extreme case. So if the inmate suffer from malaria or viral fever for a prolonged period, so he is sent back to his respective home. Having suffered from chronic disease for prolonged period, many inmates leave the school permanently. And then let us see the regimented school routines and supervisory practices. All the activities of the inmates are strictly scheduled in time. The school starts at 10 a.m. and closes at 4 p.m. with 2 breaks, 10 minutes and 30 minutes respectively. So here I am sharing my observation that may not be true for the whole of the country. So here I would like to put forth my observation relating to the ringing bell I would say. The daily life of the inmates is strictly scheduled in time with the ringing bell. 5 a.m. time to assemble for prayer, followed by a breakup of half an hour for attending nature's call and brushing the teeth. 7 to 9 a.m. study hour. 9:45 a.m. breakfast come lunch. 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. school hours. And there also they get 12 bells. 4:30 p.m. cleaning school premises, gardening, reporting teacher's house for household work, assisting cook in the kitchen, like that. And 6 p.m. evening prayer followed by discussion regarding work allotments, assessment of non-academic performance by the teacher. 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. study hour, 9 p.m. time for dinner. So holidays calendar, let us examine. The common holidays calendar of the state managed school doesn't take into account the agricultural cycle and the festival of tribal communities. So that is why that becomes a dissuading factor for the student. Students are given holidays to observe non-tribal festival rather than celebrating tribal festival. Many students remain absent in the school during the tribal festival. This is obvious consequence, as they are very much wish to be with their family and community in those occasions. So this ultimately leads to the discontinuity and irregularity in their studies. And I have shared my experience with one minister, but there are many ministers in the school. Student minister, I would like to call them student minister. Some of the responsibility are shared by student leaders, locally known as mantris, means minister, chosen by the teachers from among the inmates. The teachers select this minister without taking their consent. The concerned student takes up responsibility out of fear. This grossly violates the provision contained in Article 12, Children's Opinion on the Convention of the Rights of the Child. In the school, there are a number of ministers: Minister of Health, Minister of Discipline, Minister of Garden, Minister of Cleaning, Minister of Time, Minister of Light, Minister of Education, Minister of Food, etc. And students from 8th to 10th grade normally take on this responsibility. The portfolios of the minister indicate their duties. So now let me take you to another important area: threatening school environment. For many tribal students of the ashram, Kanyashram school, the dominating feature of childhood is powerlessness and lack of control or what happens to them. The daily life of the inmates is directed by adult teachers. Both physical and social space of the inmates further get squeezed to classroom and school premises, over-congested the hostel, and where they spend major part of the day. The strict disciplinary regime, long hours and a rigid work pattern dictated by the school system makes the simple children feel like imprisoned. So they hardly get any free time that they spend in their own mercy. Children work and even their free time is less and less free. And because of an increased supervisory and curriculization of children's life, the inmate spend major part of their childhood in an over-formal, threatening environment of the school. Thus, the very placement of tribal children in ashram and Kanyashram school leads to a process of marginalization of their childhood. The process of educating tribal children in ashram, Kanyashram school has created a kind of colonization in their life. So, the next point that I would like to discuss: culturally inappropriate curriculum and pedagogy. The urban middle class oriented education has been superimposed on them both in terms of structure and content. The education imparted to them is not life oriented. The syllabus is too heavy to assimilate the packed information contained in book. The content of this book deal with complex subject matters unknown to the tribal children, such as host of scientific terms, abstract concept, story of technological advancement, progress, founder of modern history, geography of different countries. These are not very relevant to a tribal child. Therefore, the curriculum fails to evince interest among the sample student. In addition, education imparted through medium of, the medium of instruction is not tribal dialect. It is rather regional language of the state. The textbooks are not written in their mother tongue. And it is difficult for these children to comprehend academic contents and concept while simultaneously learning a new language. They have to learn a new language and they have to understand the difficult content of this subject through a new language. That is why the child develops a kind of alienation. Some tribal children who have practically very little knowledge of the regional language are thus placed at a greater disadvantage. The non-tribal teacher of the residential school possesses a negative attitude towards the tribal children, and most of the teachers are from non-tribal background. They believe that the tribal students are inferior both mentally and culturally, and therefore do not teach them with sincerity. And now let us look at the non-tribal teachers. The non-tribal teacher neither speak nor understand the local tribal dialects. Consequently, there is very little meaningful communication between the teachers and student. The pedagogical strategy used in ashram school rely heavily on rote memorization. I repeat, memorization. Education for these children means just repeating whatever the teacher pronounces, learning the endless passage by memory without involving brain. A child has to obey, not to think. I repeat, a child has to obey, not to think. Children are trained like parrots. Having exposed to alliance system of education, the student of ashram school suffer alienation from their cultural roots. The unmotivated teachers. The residential facility for the teachers of the school is very poor. They do not get medical, market, educational facilities for their family members. Majority of the teachers remain busy to get themselves transferred to better place at the earliest. Some teachers do not keep their families with them and hence stay alone. They remain homebound and are frequently absent from the schools. As majority of them stay outside and commute to their workplace due to shortage of quarter, since the teachers have no special benefit to serve in those difficult areas, they do not put their heart into the work. So the low level of motivation and aspiration of the teachers matches with the low level of motivation and aspiration of the students. The supervision and administration of those schools which I studied are far from satisfaction because inspecting staff seldom visit those schools due to bad communication facilities. The teachers of the school do not adhere to time schedule. The inmates never do their homework seriously during study hour. The teachers who remain in charge of looking after the student make a round of visit during the study hour in their hostel only to maintain the routine supervisory requirement. And it's very interesting that corollary to the superficial supervision of the teacher is the symbolic sitting of the student during study hour. And let us also see the exploitation of the inmates by the teachers. I don't say that it is happening all over India, but in my sample school, those are my observations. The teachers consistently engage the inmates in their personal work. Inmates are also asked to assist the cook in the hostel kitchen. They are also engaged in the school garden for growing vegetables. They call Sramadan because you are getting free education, so you have to donate labor. Sramadan, that is the English meaning is donation of labor, Samdan. But when the vegetables are plucked, major part it goes to teachers' houses, only very little finds its way to the student kitchen for the consumption of inmates. The children do not get enough time to play, which stands much against the provision of Article 31 of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Sporting items supplied for the inmates are often used by the children of the teachers. For many students of the ashram school, the dominating feature of childhood is that of powerlessness and lack of control over what happens to them. The voices of the students are silenced, suppressed and ignored. The teachers take several decisions under the plea in the best interest of the child. Rather, those are directed towards controlling the children for the best interest of adult. Here adult means teachers. So, then insufficient educational incentive and misappropriation of funds. There is considerable delay in the sanction and disbursement of scholarship. The scholarship provided to each inmate is found to be inadequate due to rapid escalation of prices in the recent year. The amount received by the school for each student covers food expenses, daily needs, washing allowances, medical expenses. It is important to note that the amount is sanctioned to the inmates not for the entire year. It is given to them for 10 months. Further, the amount is not released every month. Rather, it is sanctioned in 3 to 4 installments in a year. The headmaster or the headmistress finds it extremely difficult to manage the situation because of the non-timely receipt of the installment. He or she purchases majority of the item on credit basis from the local shop. He or she buys less quantity of item with the plea of non-receipt of timely installment of money. However, when he or she receives the installment, he or she repays back the credit amount and often misappropriates the remaining funds along with the some loyal school teachers. The manipulation in account of the school is tackled by providing chicken and liquor to the inspecting staff during their visit to the school. Each inmate is further entitled to receive blanket, bed, seat, mosquito net, utensil cot, bucket, mops, etc. free of cost from the school. However, it is pity to note that most of the inmates do not receive these items due to short supply by the concerned government. The teachers take always limited supply item to their quarters for their own use. For the maintenance of the school and hostel stock register, the teachers replaces the new items with old and damaged ones. So now it is high time to examine the impact of ashram school or kanyashram on the lives of the inmates from a community perspective. Some tribal parents think that education makes their children defiant, rebellious, insolent, alienating them from the tribal culture. Second, during childhood, a community trains the children to become the kind of member that it wants him or her to be. The introduction of formal education has displaced the system of indigenous education with mass-based examination system and textbook culture. Many partially educated tribal children who have dropped out from the fold of school and completed a certain level of education remain good for nothing, unwilling to work in the home, at field, and unable to find any way of livelihood. The school-returned tribal child could be compared with a bird with broken wings. I repeat, bird with broken wings. Schooling for many tribal children acts neither as a channel for upward mobility nor as an instrument of personal and economic development. The formal education emphasized conceptualization rather than acquisition of techniques to handle practical situations. Further, the new and aligned school environment filled with modern values and ideology sets new standard of behavior and norms for these children. They are sandwiched in between two cultures, the tribal culture and the superimposed modern urban culture. So my concluding remark, the establishment of ashram school, kanyashram, for tribal children which were originally established with high ideals, but over the years, due to lack of proper management, these schools have turned into second-rated school. The lack of vocational and culture-friendly education in those residential schools has made the situation worse. Some of the most criticized features of those schools are regimentation, a rigid system of sitting, grouping, marking, and the authoritarian role of the teachers. The education is meaningful for the student as long as it is culture and environment friendly. Tribal children of ashram school, Kanyashram, are not given scope to participate in decision making affecting their lives. Ashram school has institutionalized separation of the tribal children from their community, conferring upon them a separate identity. Their proper place is the classroom cum dormitory. Teachers of ashram school need to learn to hear and see what students are saying and doing without subjecting to the filtering process that diminishes their contribution simply because they are young. Teachers fail to recognize the capacity and creativity of the children because they always try to assess students from a different cultural and adult perspective. Thank you.